throttled. Uh, it's funny, I feel more secure with my face pointing at you as an interface than I have just speaking over these PowerPoints. So we're in the McLuhan-esque square. It resembles, very strangely, the old Aristotelian logic square, predicate calculus. We can see coming out of that if P then Q, P therefore Q, the modus ponens, fundamental like building blocks to Western society, Western empiricism. If that was an invention, I contend maybe Islamic societies preserved and advanced Aristotle and scientific method and the 11th century, 10th century, 8th century. Um, but it's Aristotle, it's predicate calculus, it's a convenient square to work things out. Concepts. The medium is the concept. The medium we're dealing with is the city and the internet, and also the medium, perhaps, of COVID. COVID enhances socially enhances the ability to get online. It pushes to its limit the idea of the absurd limit. When we're all online, who are we? Did we leave? We lost. We're disembodied, which a lot of the post-Marxist anti-neoliberal capitalists such as Berardi, Christian humanist Virilio are talking about. The dangers of disembodiment, the danger of an anti-analog culture. Push it. COVID During the age of COVID, we are pushed toward the anti analog. What it retrieves is a sense of time without space. But what I found with certain people, older people, is that they were having all these massive Zoom meetings and I was just locked down in these spaces. It was boring. I was here on this stupid IKEA couch. Instead of moving my body around, I maintained exercise, but it was just a drag. What does it obsolesce? It obsolesces crowds, collective behavior, collectivizing, which must have been around during the Spanish flu. Did it obsolesce the city and the university? Big questions. Probably not the city, probably not the university in some of the more research functions, reputation systems, but it certainly did point out a lot of the bureaucratic infrastructure, the Ponzi scheme aspects of the university and its ballooning inflation, nearly, I think it was 200% since the end of the 80s. Where's that going to? Upper management, this whole culture of sub-deans for everything, which frankly is a response to tenured professors not being able to advance their own topic in a siloed society. Therefore, to increase their salaries, they must become a subdean or dean. This is the cause. The top heaviness of institutions, as opposed to autodidacticism, is a way of ballooning the cost of the university, creating language games and little insular monastic things we talked about within the university from the early talks with Professor Herb Baldwin on the creation of the university as a utopian space, but also a costly space, a space of a Ponzi scheme, of pay to play, paying into the poker game to experience the dividends of future society, suspended gratification, playing on all these things that the transition from Roman chattel slavery, in which you could buy your own freedom, but tended to work with your master. A great book I just read, Four Ancient Cities, covered Katahoyuk, the Turkish city, ancient 6,000-year-old city, Pompeii, Angkor Wat, and Cahokia. Interesting compare and contrast in that book. But in Pompeii, it showed how freed slaves became actual rich men, actually became professional classes, accountants, actuaries, to the former masters, often becoming richer, wealthier than the masters in ancient Pompey society. Um, Furthermore, let's go beyond this McLuhan Square. City blog crowd, oral age, literate age. The car is removable room from that house to sort of be the limit zone, just the way the cell phone is. The city and the internet are interesting siblings. The car and the cell phone are interesting sibling relationships within this. Cell phone, we see that the car, cell phone are siblings, I contend. As Virilio contended, the ringing of the Protestant church bell is very similar to the ringing of the cell phone in the pocket, which devolves into a leash, yanking you in your free time, which is 24/7, become not free time. Did it become chattel slavery to a certain extent? These questions are open within the scheme of neoliberal capitalism. Has certainly there's a contention that chattel slavery is bigger than it ever was, working for free, but in the case of entire populations thinking they're getting over alienation, just as the Fordist person thought by owning a Model T, a very American invention to give the worker the means to which they can advance at least to the extent of what they are making, i.e. a car, which was very expensive, still was expensive, the Model T, but most, like a personal computer, I remember those days, my first Macintosh was $5,000. Desk unit, typical price on a laptop was $2,000, and that had not changed for many years. Actually, it's going back, with the case of the Macintosh, it's going back up to that level. Moore's law, it increases and so forth. The internet, what does it do? Central nervous system, forgive me for shaking this, it's on my laptop. Information processing, communication, immediacy of experience, but it's a leash. Reverses into Big Brother. There's an intermediary, as Berardi, Virilio, Baudrillard, and many of the other critics of neoliberal capitalism, post-Marxists, Bong-Kyo Han, the amazing Korean-born German philosopher of adding his spin to a critique of neoliberal capitalism, post-Marxist, I don't know. Ulrich Beck and Anthony Giddens talking about risk cultures. The interceding, the surveillance person, the Big Brother, it's a form of constant surveillance. These lectures probably would have been a little more frank and a little more filled with constructive criticism have I not been aware or not have the vicissitude of private conversations without listening. Now we have algorithms judging what we're actually saying, which is twice as sinister, 10 times as sinister, in that there's not even human agency beyond it. It's much like the drones that fly over and kill people on the ground, wipe out whole ceremonies on the ground in Afghanistan, Iraq. These are bots that float through our system, judging, keywording, isolating, all of these things. There was discussion within just the action of Snowden saying this, pointing out the fact that, okay, all of this information is gathered in a central source, but why? Not all of us can be terrorists. The notion of a bureaucratic assembly, this is very akin to building a cathedral or building a pyramid, building of databases filled with every conversation ever had, cuts you off from expression and reflection on what you're saying, and cuts down on the Socratic process, the ability to speak freely, or at least the advocacy to speak freely. All of this was amassed. It was chewed away with through algorithms, essentially bots, programmed by geeks, by computer programmers with agendas, and it was served up as an expensive pork barrel project by the NSA to reflect the most expensive means possible to weed through this stuff. To the end, very Kafkaesque end, simply because it's there. Digging irrigation ditches and using the materials to build the mounds. Certainly Phil K. Dick, in a couple of his stories, has addressed this notion way back in Eisenhower era America, surveillance under McCarthyism, and so forth. Tuning out from information overload, preoccupation with trivia, virus, loss of data, and all of it. This is when it's pushed, it turns into these horrible things: viruses, computer virus, loss of data, and the resulting anxiety and technophobia. Protocols, oh my God, use and exchange value, and this is part of Semioticalism, psychology of Semioticalism. Everything is recorded, therefore everything can be quantified. So this plays right into the Semioticalism that, hey, everything's got a price on it. Are there no such things as entities unto themselves, such as deontology, Kantian, as in Immanuel Kant, Kantian deontology? Question mark. Maybe no, because it's not just a conversation in a backyard barbecue where two people are playing with ideas and it flies up into the air, much like Socrates with his students. Without Plato recording this, we have an anxiety and technophobia about why is this actually being recorded. Your phones listen in your conversation. Is it, as we saw in that special social dilemma, a piece on surveillance, manipulation, database recovery? There was a famous saying by Jaron Lanier, Doug Rushkoff: if the item is free online, you are the commodity. You don't buy the software, use it for free. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You're it. You're the commodity, bought and sold. But as the special pointed out, it's not so much they want your data, because NSA, the government, has the data. It is to the extent of subtle manipulation toward behaviors, toward consumers' behaviors, toward an acceptance of being quantified as numbers, acceptance of Aristotelian sense of use and exchange, use value in the semiology of semiocapitalism psychology. Use value becomes this slushy thing. What do you need? Roof over the head, food in your mouth, water to drink, person to love. Becomes much, much more, because we have to drive whole culture. Hyperreality in the virtual becomes the real. Many people have started to address this. My favorite is E.M. Forster's book, the short novella, long short story, The Machine Stops, in which there is a machine, the internet, and it distributes people utilitarianly. Women have babies and they're distributed all over the world evenly. A young man, read Oedipal, wants to meet his mother. Mother's busy in the cultural capital economy, free economy, type of chattel slavery, of creating TED-like talks. This was brilliant. People just sit behind the machines creating lectures, and they get very upset when they feel there's not a great response, to the point of suicide, feeling like they want to commit suicide. This is so prophetic. It's unbelievable. Kafka, Phil K. Dick, all these other, Borges, are talking about hyperreality and the virtual becoming real, but E.M. Forster is an overlooked genius with the one story, The Machine Stops, in this notion of the whole psychology of the internet. This, what Berardi called the psychology of semiocapitalism. Bong-Kyo Han called this the psychology of semiocapitalism. Let's go on. The internet, tribal village, nonlinear thought. It brings these back in. We are tribes. The tribe of Trumpies did their thing and spun on their own thing. The tribe of neo-liberals and also NIMBY liberals read the New York Times and spun on their own juices over here. And these tribes were not meeting. Um, Hopefully, after COVID, a effect of COVID is that we could, would, should continue to meet and reconcile into types of logic. They tended to, as Berardi rightly said, and certainly in some of the left right politics, which are strangely neither left nor right, but exist in this semio-capitalism, the semiotics, the language. When certain people say science is real, it's like, yeah, but we know the world is round, but we also know that we are multi-celled creatures living in types of neuroendocrinology. We have marching orders from our analog bodies, and that's science too. These are weird, slushy fields in which we extract facts from values rather than values from facts. The semio-capitalism, semio-academia language games, we often, the, the, the college becomes a place of pedagogy instead of scientific learning. STEM teaching is also a pedagogy of reductivist materiality. Boo. Not good in the light of history in the West and in the East, anywhere, Africa, Latin America, on the deontology of human worth. Interesting anecdote in McLuhan's Understanding Media book is when they first showed films in the 20s to New Guinea tribes, supposedly extremely vibrant, vociferous, tribal type people with tons of languages. I'm reminded of Jared Diamond's books and his work in the New Guinea tribes, showing these movies, these cowboy movies of just cowboys getting shot randomly and so forth. And the tribes people started laughing and they were elated and they were saying, well, you're supposed to be fearful and this is like cowboys. And a translation from a shamanic type, a priestly type, said, wow, we're relieved. Actually, we thought you guys with all your technology were superior to us, but look how you portray violence and death on your films. You certainly don't hold life in high regard, so you're actually a little bit inferior to us. So it kind of relieves us from the fear of you. Very poignant aspect. Same thing with showing, another case in McLuhan, showing the grapes of wrath to people in Indonesia in the 30s. And it's just anecdotal from McLuhan. Same reaction. People were like, whoa, God, you people are like so misaligned. And they said, why? This is our poor. These are poor Okies going to California in a car. And the Indonesians said, at least you have cars. I mean, you guys are like misinformed. You might capitalize on your attributes. You got this thing. Why are these people bitching about, uprooting and going somewhere else? So these cultural reactions to these things are pervasive. TV, privacy, physical distance, national borders, parochialism. It obsolesces us, print media, retail outlet, all of this stuff. But it retrieves anarchy. And the whole slogan, get with your tribe. Well, who's my tribe? I have to self-market to become the tribe. Is my skin my identity? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. This idea that we have to self-market. We see this with influencers. We see kind of a post-feminist aspect of twerking and showing your rippling abs, and this idea of the hypermateriality of the beautiful body, creating influencers, living on the shallow, stupid idea of likes, and even grown people saying, yeah, I know it's nothing, but I like the likes. Dopamine injection. Okay, capitalism, consumption of goods, exploitation of resources and materials. In the book, Cities for 6,000 Years, we are talking about disposable culture. Perhaps the notion of early capitalism, materialism, was there from the start. That's an open question. 6,000 years. Exploitation of resources and markets, like duh. It's been around since the dawn of time. Retrieves jungle hunting and gathering, intertribal competition from the beginning, especially as archaeologists are looking at the ancient city as actually creating disposable cultures, trash heaps, disposing human lives, things like that. Tyranny of monopoly feudalism gets reverses into homelessness, starvation. Monopoly feudalism. Did they live under the singular idea that this life was suffering? Early Christianity. So therefore they must build cathedrals, they must purchase indulgences to have a better life in the afterlife. What was the psychology as a neoliberal capitalism, Berardi contends, is no less psychological. We live on likes. We create cultural capital, which is treated as real, but it's not really. Bunch of things. Environmental destruction, disposable culture. Going further, alcohol to alleviate all that. Energy is S, gives you the tongue back to say what you think. Reverses into the hangover, depression, body illnesses, degradation of the body, attack on the soft tissue of the body, la di da di da. All these things we can put in the middle of that. Recreational drugs, reverses into addiction, counter to the world of neoliberal capitalism. This is it an escape. We return to a childlike impulsiveness. I contend a childlike, womb-like inclusion into the kind of space of the womb, the warm feeling, having the alcohol through your blood. What it obsolesces is inhibition, stiffness, and it, to a certain extent, in the middle of it, might obsolesce alienation, but then tends to bring back the alienation because you rob, as far as I know about neuroendocrinology, you rob from here to pay to there, simply put, through narcotics, alcohol, and so forth. Credit card, consumption, inflation, but look what it retrieves: bartering, cashless society. Oops, surveillance society. Obsolesces cash. Is that a good thing? We're finding this in this increasing consumer society, patterning people, adding algorithms to people, having AI develop its own algorithms about what human beings do and behave like. Twitter, audience, collective voice, conversation. What are the bad features? Isolation from those physically nearby. Everyone at the cafe all dolled up and not even looking at each other. Bars used to be a place with flirtation and open conversation. Planes. I remember my first trip to Europe, sitting on a plane, and this Belgian gentleman spoke to me for a couple hours on ideas, and that just disappeared. When's the last time you really had a conversation with someone next to you on a plane? Someone you could die with in terms of risk culture. Almost never. They plug you up, you're focused ahead. Twitter, mediation, over mediation, chatter, shallowness, mob mentality. Obsolescence, the phone call, the email. When I want to feel contact with my peeps, friends, family, colleagues, whatever, I just post something. It's very efficient. Oh, I saw you did that. Comes the conversation back. I no longer have to pinpoint the phone call. I'm old enough to remember those days. The big psychological phone call to this or that best friend. Now I have 4,600 best friends. Just kidding. On Facebook, some big stupid number. On Instagram, I like posting this. I get reaction. My dopamine shoot up. All of the above. Suburbs, solitude, extend solitude. You're out of the big city. You're out of the crush. Suburbs did fare better with under COVID than urban environments, but they kind of fared a little better than rural environments because these are places where make food. You still have to have contact. They're essential workers. Most people in the suburbs, I knew the tendency devolved back into people who just wanted to be online to extend that solitude. It reverses into conformity, It retrieves homesteading in a weird way, your little detached house. We talked about that from Dream Cities, the book. Obsolescence, the rural town, urban congestion, the both. But the rural town makes our food. Urban congestion is a cosmopolitan sense of the Epicurean stranger. Possibilities, work. We talked about the weak ties giving you work. Cities as places for young people always have been for 6,000 years a way to diversify the gene pool. Find that person to breed with if you're cisgender. Accept alternative forms to cisgender behavior through gay, straight, LBGT, different tolerance of different narratives because you tolerate strangers. Strangers bring you good things in general, unless they're stabbing you or mugging you. These different aspects, the suburbs have kind of suffered, and after post-peak oil and certainly after COVID, people are finding they could do this anywhere. Perpetuating adolescence, people get married, have their babies. There's a new trend of having your babies early because women do exist on a clock regardless of freezing their eggs, and have your doors early so you can live the next half of your life. It is emerging as a program. LAT, living apart together, having a relationship but living apart together, being together as a couple but having two different places. Very new, happens in all three ranges: urban, suburban, rural, so forth. Pedagogy, the college, but also the business place where this happens. We need pedagogies, rough frameworks for what we think are empirical certitudes. Pedagogies from the French Revolution, pedagogies from modernity, pedagogies from risk culture, which is transplanted industrial pedagogies of Eisenhower era America. I saw this Vietnam special where Nixon talks about, you great silent majority are for the war in Vietnam, and yet, we're waiting for you to speak up. Whereas 90% of the population did not favor the continuation of the war in Vietnam for as a bulwark against global communism and the Cold War proxy politics. Extends knowledge acquisition and dissemination. Out there, you hear of this, you have rights, you consider this, the deontology of Kant, that's a good thing. Yes, it's a good thing. How does that work out for pedagogy? Does it really exist in nature? Rights for all, urban cosmopolitanism, diversity, tolerance, all these things exist in the square. What it does reverse into in a monastic way, and clearly there's been, reread my Paglia and Virilio and these critics of not just neoliberal capitalism, but sort of shoot from the hip pedagogy. It increases indoctrination, brainwashing. Our expensive little colleges become lifestyle monasteries, where you go here, you go there, you go to Seven Sisters for this lifestyle, you go to Bard for that lifestyle, you go to Stony Brook for that other lifestyle, not because you can't afford these little colleges. Whenever it's pay to play or pay for your niche as a marketed individual and your little getting with your peeps, getting with your pedagogy, it becomes expensive in its own sake. It defeats the notion of diversity. It reverses into pattern recognition as a strategy for coping with information overload. We're looking for patterns. 80-20 rule. Oh, you act that way because you're like this. You act that way because you're a cisgender white guy. Okay, I got it. 80-20. People in pedagogies are not looking for the outlier position on any of the pedagogy. It can devolve into ad hominem argumentation, false argumentation. It can devolve into stereotyping, prejudice, what people point out in NIMBY liberalism. You think one way, you act another way. The sort of erosion of free thought. Down, what does it retrieve? Infantile mimicking, not thinking for yourself, which is tough. What's the great Jung quote? Uh, Rigorous, verifiable thinking is a difficult thing. Therefore, most devolve into judging, merely judging. We find this again and again and again with pedagogy. Oh, you're one of those. A judgment instead of engaging a person as an interlocutor. Obsolescence, spontaneous exploration. Hey, let's disagree in a bar, but you take that position. Let's have a civil, balanced, Socratic exploration. Let's come to a third term. The beauty of the Socratic method. Um, it obsolesces ignorance and naivete, but creates types of prejudice, dogma. Certainly, dogma. Pedagogy can devolve into dogma. Big question. Do our regions, do our spaces, certainly do our colleges, become bastions of pedagogy? I do contend that academics think a little too highly of their physical settings of the university. The whole tenure and promotion cases could become merely hazing, pyramid schemes, so forth. Specialties, niche specialties, siloing, as we talked before, become dead-end rabbit holes to which the individual must become a sub-dean of something to advance their salary to remain viable in an economy. It does point out the life of the mind and so forth, but it is fraught with this other stuff. News coming from everywhere. Yes, it is news, a single perspective. Game, play, blood sports, ritual participant, violence, idleness, boredom, games. Game of Thrones, a whole popularity of that program was a form of potlatch, creative destruction of its laboring classes, the underclasses, in spectacle. Back to Marcus Aurelius and Commodus as father-son. What emerged from that? I believe I'm about to get throttled, so see you in the next lecture.